Have you ever looked at a historical image, maybe a painting of some grand feast, or read about past customs and just thought, wow, that's absolutely wild?
Oh, definitely.
Or honestly, maybe even a little disgusting.
Yeah, that too. It's a really natural, almost visceral reaction, isn't it?
It really is. Our modern sensibilities just immediately kick in.
Exactly.
But what if those practices that seem so repulsive, what if they weren't just bizarre, arbitrary choices?
What if they were actually perfectly rational? Maybe even necessary for their time.
Right. What if there was a profound underlying logic to the very things that make us kind of squirm today?
This is such a compelling question because, well, our concept of disgust isn't some fixed universal emotion that just exists across all time and place.
It feels like it should be, though, doesn't it?
It feels that way, but far from it, actually. It's an emotion that's deeply shaped by our culture,
Yeah.
definitely by our scientific understanding, and just the very era we happen to live in. So when we take that broader perspective, you find that many practices that make us raise an eyebrow or even feel a bit, queasy today were once completely unremarkable or even essential, maybe for survival, for health, or just for maintaining your social standing.
And that reframing of disgust, that's crucial then. It completely shifts how we look at historical practices.
It has to.
So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into this fascinating, sometimes, squirm-inducing world of Renaissance eating habits.
Sounds good.
We've meticulously gathered a whole stack of sources. We've got in-depth academic articles, some cutting-edge research, even some actual period etiquette manuals,
Those are always revealing.
aren't they?
Yeah.
All to understand why, what they ate, how they ate it, and even how they fundamentally thought about food was perfectly logical for them, even if it profoundly challenges our modern sensibilities, our ideas of cleanliness, or even just what tastes good.
And our mission for this deep dive, really, is to go way beyond those surface level judgments like, ew, gross.
Right, get past the ear.
We want to truly explore the practical realities, the social context, the economic drivers, and the scientific realities, or what passed for science then, that shaped their whole culinary landscape.
Okay.
You're going to discover some genuinely surprising facts, I think. Detailed insights, maybe a few vivid anecdotes that really illustrate the points.
Good.
And it might just change how you think about your own dinner table, and certainly how you view history. It's about stepping into their shoes, or maybe their rather unwashed hands, and seeing the world from a truly different perspective.
Okay, so we set the stage. Our idea of disgust is very much a product of our own time. So let's actually travel back. Imagine stepping into a grand Renaissance hall, maybe for one of those elaborate banquets.
Big feast.
Your mind might conjure images of, elegance, refined manners, maybe theatrical displays, beautiful food.
Sure, that's the image.
And while some of that was definitely true, what you might actually encounter by today's standards would be surprisingly, unrefined.
Yeah, unrefined is a good word for it, from our perspective.
Let's start with something really basic, something we do without thinking, washing your hands before you eat.
Right, but this immediately begs the question. How was cleanliness even understood back then? In a pre-germ theory world.
Good point. What did clean mean?
Because our modern hygiene, it often emphasizes privacy, right? As we usually wash our hands in a bathroom, a private space, before a meal.
Yeah, you don't do it at the table.
Exactly. But Renaissance etiquette frequently mandated public hand washing before meals. It wasn't just about, rinsing off some dirt. It was a highly performative act, almost theatrical. A public declaration of your cleanliness to everyone who might share a dish with you.
A performance of hygiene. And the details of this public ritual, they really paint a picture that challenges our modern ideas, maybe even seems a bit, amusing today.
Go on.
There was this incredibly influential Italian poet, Giovanni della Casa, in his 1558 manners book, Galateo.
Ah, yes, della casa. Very important.
He explicitly advised, and I'm quoting loosely here, don't comb your hair or wash your hands in public, except, and here's the kicker, the exception is washing hands before dinner, because then it should be done in full sight of others, even if you don't need to wash them at all.
Wait, even if your hands are already clean?
Even if they're spotless, so that whoever dips into the same bowl as you will be certain of your cleanliness. You had to put on a show.
Wow. So it's purely about the perception for your fellow diners.
Exactly. And they had large basins, often quite fancy, silver or pewter maybe, right there in the castle, great halls, specifically for this very public ritual. It says so much about their priorities, doesn't it?
It really does. And that broader perspective shows a fundamental difference in how they understood health and disease.
Right.
No germs. Their approach to cleanliness was much more about social appearance, practical necessity in a communal setting, rather than our modern scientific grasp of microscopic pathogens. The perception of purity. The idea that you looked clean and were therefore safe to share a dish with, that was absolutely key. Especially given the standard practice of shared dishes, which was common everywhere, from the humblest cottage to the grandest royal banquet.
That focus on public demonstration makes me wonder, okay, given that communal nature, what other shared practices might surprise us? Because if you finally sit down to eat, ready to dig in,
Yeah.
you might notice something glaringly absent from your place setting, your own individual fork.
The fork, or lack thereof.
Right. Forks were relatively new then. They came from Italy, but they were very slow to catch on across Europe, especially in Northern Europe, and especially among men.
That's a crucial detail, the gender aspect.
Yeah. Many men considered them excessively refined, maybe a bit showy, or even get this effeminate until well into the 17th century.
That's hard to imagine now, isn't it?
Yeah.
A fork being seen as unmanly.
Totally. Can you imagine the reaction if you told guys today using a fork was effeminate? It was a real cultural battle back then.
It really was. So instead, you had personal knives. Often the same knives you carried for personal defense or just general utility.
Your everyday carry knife was your dinner knife.
Pretty much. You'd use it to cut your food, maybe spear a piece, and then maneuver it to your mouth.
Yeah.
Spoons, well, if they were available, were often quite crudely made. Maybe wood, maybe horn.
Not fine silverware then.
Not usually for common folk.
Yeah.
And like everything else, frequently communally used. So, pass the spoon.
Oh, wow.
Which meant the vast majority of eating was done with your fingers and that knife.
Okay.
And that, as a direct consequence, significantly influenced how food was prepared and presented. It had to be manageable with fingers and a knife.
So less fiddly stuff.
Exactly. You'd see more stews, pottages, soft, easily manageable foods. Far fewer individual cuts of meat that needed intricate carving at the table. It really shaped the entire culinary landscape.
And the manners themselves. Those etiquette guides, they are frankly quite revealing because they weren't just suggestions for being polite.
No, there were explicit rules.
Yeah. Explicit rules against behaviors that must have been common enough to need writing down.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, we're talking rules against scratching yourself at the table, spitting openly, blowing your nose with your hands, putting fingers in your ears or hands on your head, wiping sweat with your napkin, the napkin presumably meant for dabbing your mouth.
The very fact that someone had to write down, "Please don't blow your nose into your hand at dinner," tells you so much about the daily reality, doesn't it?
It's raw, uncensored history right there.
Absolutely. The existence of rules against these actions proves how widespread they were. It tells us more about daily life than any formal painting ever could. It wasn't just hypothetical bad habits they were warning against.
Right.
Even King Henry VIII,
Yeah.
the epitome of grandeur and power.
Yeah. What about him?
An Italian guest noted him thrusting gobbets like chunks of food directly into his cheeks.
No! Henry VIII, really?
Really?
Yeah.
This observation suggests that while, sure, some individuals, some households were definitely aiming for refinement, many people, even at the highest levels, still engaged in practices we find highly inappropriate, maybe even pretty gross, today. It wasn't just the lower classes. These habits cut right across society.
So King Henry VIII, the guy with all the portraits looking majestic, was really just shoveling food. That seems almost unbelievable.
Well, perhaps shoveling is strong, but certainly less refined than we might imagine. Even among royalty, a degree of practical expediency often won out over what we now think of as polite.
Wow. And then there's the communal dining itself. You mentioned the shared dishes. Food was frequently served from these massive platters or bowls in the center of the table.
Central placement.
And you were simply expected to just reach in, grab your share.
Yep, help yourself.
The explicit rule, according to one guide, was, in good society, one does not put both hands into the dish. Okay, fair enough. It is most refined to use only 3 fingers of the hand.
3 fingers. That was the height of refinement.
Apparently, using one hand with only 3 fingers to pick food from a shared bowl, that really puts our individual plates and cutlery into perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And that shared dish practice, I mean, while it was incredibly efficient, obviously, in an era before individual plating was the norm,
Yeah, less washing up, too, I suppose.
probably. But it obviously presents huge hygiene concerns from our modern perspective. But for them, that perceived disgust we feel now, which is so rooted in germ theory.
Right.
It was just absent. They didn't understand disease transmission that way, so the risk felt totally different. Their logic was, I saw you wash your hands in that public basin, you look clean, we're good. The idea of invisible germs wasn't part of their world.
But even with those shared dishes, there were some boundaries, right? Some rules.
Oh yes, there were lines you didn't cross, even then.
For example, redipping a piece of bread you'd already bitten into back into the soup or sauce. That was considered boorish, quite rude.
Okay, so no double dipping, that seems familiar.
Kind of. And offering food you'd already half eaten to someone else was also rude. Unless
There's always an exception.
the giver was of a much higher rank. So a king could offer a courtier a half-eaten morsel as a sign of great favor, maybe.
Bestowing his royal leftovers.
Pretty much. But you couldn't do that to your dinner companion if you were equals. It just reinforces that rigid social hierarchy, even in how you shared food.
It does. And these rules, these admonitions, they're fascinating because they show this budding awareness of social decorum, right? Polite behavior is starting to be codified. But they also highlight just how common practices were that modern science links directly to spreading bacteria and disease. It's this paradox, developing social norms against a backdrop of limited scientific knowledge.
And in, say, lesser pubs or maybe ordinary homes, did the sharing extend to drinks?
Absolutely. Tankards, maybe leather cups called jacks, were often designed to be shared, passed around the table.
For shared cups?
Often, yeah. There might be a cup bearer whose job it was to rinse or at least wipe it down between users.
Wipe it down. Lovely.
But you can imagine how effective that cleaning was in an age without proper soap or disinfectants. Probably not very.
Okay, and waste disposal. This one might genuinely make you squirm. It definitely challenges that image of dining elegance.
Brace ourselves.
A common practice, widely documented, was to simply throw bones, scraps, anything you didn't eat, under the table.
Just onto the floor.
Onto the floor. Often where dogs were roaming around, presumably acting as impromptu cleanup crews.
Okay, so the dogs ate the scraps off the floor during the meal.
Seems like it. Etiquette manuals explicitly advised against this, urging diners, again I'm paraphrasing, don't throw bones or leftovers under the table to litter the floor or toss them onto the tablecloth.
They had to tell people not to throw bones on the table.
Yes, or put them back in the serving dish.
Yeah.
The fact they had to spell that out really says something about the baseline habits they were trying to change.
It really does. It points to this conscious effort within Renaissance society to improve dining standards,
Yeah.
to create a more refined experience. But at the same time, it reveals just how widespread those less refined habits were.
Exactly. People had to be told not to do these things, which implies they were happening all the time.
Perhaps one of the most striking differences, though, was the common use of trenchers.
Ah, the bread plates.
Exactly. These were pieces of stale bread, usually cut into thick squares, maybe 4 days old, so they were quite hard.
Okay.
And they served as absorbent, disposable plates for your food, your sauces, your gravies.
So you're literally using a slab of old bread as your plate. It's soaking up all the juices from your meat, the sauce.
Everything.
And then after the meal, these soggy, food-soaked trenchers were often collected and given to the poor.
Yes. Or sometimes to the dogs.
Okay, giving them to the dogs maybe makes a bit more sense, but giving this used bread plate to another person, today that concept would be seen as incredibly unhygienic, maybe quite repulsive. But for them, it wasn't viewed that way at all. For them, it was remarkably resourceful. It minimized waste. It provided some sustenance to those in need. It highlights a completely different ethical and practical framework around food and consumption.
Totally. The slow adoption of forks, the reliance on communal dishes, the use of trenchers. These weren't just quirky cultural preferences or a simple lack of refinement, as we might judge them.
No, there were reasons.
Deep reasons. They were significantly influenced by ingrained economic realities and the technological limitations of the time. Individual, finely made cutlery, that was an expensive luxury, way beyond most people.
Right.
These communal dining practices were practical, efficient solutions for feeding a lot of people with limited resources and minimal dishware. Our perception of them as disgusting is a direct consequence of modern scientific breakthroughs like germ theory and the material abundance we enjoy today, which allows for individual plating and strict hygiene standards they just couldn't imagine.
So our squeamishness isn't really about them being backward.
Not at all. It's a direct result of scientific progress they simply hadn't made yet. It really forces us to question our own assumptions about what's obvious or normal, doesn't it?
Okay, so we've seen the surprisingly public, very communal rituals around the Renaissance dinner table. Let's now turn our focus to the main event. What exactly were they serving up on those trenchers or shared platters?
Like the food itself.
Because before refrigeration, before comprehensive food safety rules, figuring out what ended up on your plate was a constant, huge challenge. Forget your modern supermarket, with fresh meat, veggies, fruit year-round, flown in from everywhere.
A completely different world.
For the Renaissance diner, just ensuring food quality, preventing spoilage, that was a never-ending battle. And it dictated almost everything about their diet.
This brings us to a really crucial point. The choices they made about where they got their food, and especially how they preserved it, were driven by some incredibly harsh realities.
Like what, for instance?
Well, fresh meat, for example, that was largely a luxury, primarily for the wealthy elite.
Only the rich got fresh meat regularly.
Pretty much. And even then, it was often killed just before consumption, specifically for an extravagant effect at a banquet. It was a display of ultimate freshness and status. Look, we just killed this, rather than being stored for days or weeks like we might today.
Wow, so for the average person, or even a moderately well-off merchant.
Preserved meats were far, far more common than fresh. It wasn't even close.
Okay.
Meat was also highly seasonal. Pigs were typically slaughtered in December, which gave you a winter supply of cured pork, bacon, ham.
Salting season.
Exactly. And then lamb in the spring was a welcome change from those dwindling preserved supplies. So this reliance on preserved meats wasn't really a preference. It was a fundamental necessity for just getting through the year.
And the preservation methods themselves, you said they were ingenious, but they really changed the food, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to remember how much they altered the texture and flavor in ways that might seem quite strong to us. Drying was fundamental.
Like jerky. Sort of, but on a bigger scale. Used for grains, fruits, but also extensively for meats and fish. Think of the famous stockfish from Scandinavia.
Dried cod.
Just air-dried cod, yeah. Hung up in the cold, dry air. It created this hard, almost wood-like product that could last for ages.
Yeah.
But you had to soak it, often beat it, for a long time before you could even cook it.
Sounds like work. And salting. You said that was king.
It really was. The most common method for preserving meat and fish. It worked by drawing out moisture through osmosis, creating an environment where bacteria just couldn't thrive.
So it wasn't just a sprinkle of salt?
Oh no. Think big barrels, layered with meat and coarse salt. It could make meat last for years if done right. And you could dry salt things, pickle vegetables, and brine, making them available way out of season.
Right, when nothing fresh was growing.
Exactly. Smoking was another big one, especially for fish and pork.
How did that work? You'd cut the meat into strips, maybe dip it briefly in the salt solution first, then hang it over a smoldering fire. You would absorb the smoke and dry slowly. The smoke added flavor, but also acted as a preservative.
Okay. And pickling?
Of course. Preserving vegetables, fish like herring, even beef in brine or vinegar, or sometimes even strong alcohol.
Alcohol.
Yeah, but as you can imagine, pickling imparted a very strong, often sour taste that the cooking then had to accommodate, or maybe disguise.
They even had confits, right? Cooked in fat.
Yes. Meats, often duck or goose, slow cooked in their own fat and then submerged entirely in that fat.
Yeah.
It created this airtight seal.
Like canning almost, but with fat.
Kinda. You could preserve them for a long time, especially if stored somewhere cool and dark or even buried underground sometimes.
Buried food.
In some cases, yeah. And jellying too, encasing meats and fish in a gelatin made from rich meat stock that's documented from the 14th century.
Right.
Basically creating an aspic to seal the food.
So many methods just to stop food going bad.
And beyond beer and wine, which we'll get to, fermentation was key. For cheese, obviously transforming milk into something long-lasting and nutrient-dense, but also for vegetables, creating early forms of things like sauerkraut.
Right.
But all these methods, while incredibly effective for preservation without refrigerators, they often resulted in meats that were really tough, incredibly salty, or had strong, sometimes gamey, or just altered flavors.
So they needed serious help to be tasty.
They really required significant culinary intervention. A lot of effort and creativity went into making them palatable, even for a Renaissance palate, which was probably used to stronger tastes than ours.
So how do they make these heavily preserved, tough, super salty meats appealing, or at least edible?
Spices, that's the big answer.
Ah, the spice trade.
Exactly. Now, it's a bit of a myth that spices were only used to cover up rotten food. People weren't intentionally eating spoiled stuff if they could help it.
Okay, that's good to know.
But It is true that a significant number of Renaissance meat recipes called for heavy spicing, specifically to mask, or at least mellow, the often foul, meaning strong or slightly off taste and smell of the common salted and preserved meats.
So the spices helped make not-so-great meat taste better.
Precisely. It suggests that while maybe not overtly spoiled, the underlying quality of the preserved meat was often less than ideal. Spices played a crucial role in making less than fresh or heavily preserved ingredients more palatable. Think of it as a spectrum of freshness, maybe, rather than just fresh versus rotten. Spices help bridge that gap from tolerable to tasty or even luxurious.
And for the wealthy, those spices were a big deal, right?
Huge exotic spices like black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, ginger. These were incredibly expensive. They had to be imported from distant lands, Asia mostly.
Cost a fortune.
Absolutely. So using them lavishly wasn't just about flavor. It was a symbol of immense wealth and status, showing off your economic power right there on the plate.
So more spice meant more money.
Pretty much. And conversely, the ability to afford and serve fresh meat, which didn't need heavy spicing to cover its taste, was also a clear marker of wealth, a luxury few could afford regularly.
This created a huge divide then in just the basic taste and quality of food between classes.
A massive divide. That perceived disgusting element we might feel about eating heavily preserved, maybe slightly funky smelling meat. That was disproportionately the experience of the poor. They simply lacked the money for fresh alternatives.
So palatability was tied to your wallet.
Absolutely. What seems disgusting to us now was often just a matter of economic circumstance and pure survival for many people then. What was a choice for the rich was just grim necessity for the poor.
So besides the preserved stuff, what other maybe unusual ingredients were on the menu, especially at those big banquets?
Well, for the wealthy, grand feasts often featured large game birds that we rarely, if ever, eat today. Things like peacocks, swans, cranes.
Peacocks like with the feathers?
Sometimes they'd even redress them in their feathers after cooking for presentation. These were highly sought after for high-class banquets, totally inaccessible to commoners. They weren't just food, they were centerpieces, showstoppers.
But did they taste good? Peacock sounds like it might be tough.
You hit the nail on the head. What's fascinating is that their palatability was often secondary to their symbolic value and visual spectacle.
Really?
Yeah, peacock, for instance, was explicitly described in a 1599 text as being, and I quote, very hard meat, of bad temperature, and as evil juice.
Evil juice, so it tasted bad.
Apparently. So many of these unusual foods were eaten by the elite, not merely for taste, but as these extravagant status symbols, displays of wealth, culinary skill. The inherent taste was often way down the list of priorities compared to the wow factor.
So taste took a backseat to showing off.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just birds. In coastal regions like the Baltic or Mediterranean, maritime delicacies like porpoise and even whale were considered high-end foods. Again, valued for rarity and the effort to get them.
Whale meat. Right. Okay. And then there was the resourceful side you mentioned, using everything.
Absolutely. Nose-to-tail eating wasn't invented recently. Given how valuable animals were, very little was wasted. Cookbooks from prosperous families, not just peasant households, included recipes for things like tripe.
Stomach lining.
Yep. Calf's feet, even lamb's heads. Calves' heads and cow's udders were common ingredients, with really detailed recipes for how to prepare them.
Cow udders, how do they cook those?
Recipes exist. It shows this truly pragmatic, incredibly resourceful approach. Use every single part. Animals were huge investments. So the perceived disgusting element here, for us, is really just our modern squeamishness or cultural aversion to internal organs. It's not a reflection of their lack of skill or taste. It's actually a testament to their resourcefulness and how well they understood the value of their livestock.
So by contrast, what did the common person eat day to day?
Much more humble fare, often quite bland by our standards.
Sure.
Often quite bland by our standards. It frequently consisted of what they called white meat, which wasn't chicken, but things like milk, cheese, butter, eggs.
Oh, dairy and egg.
Yeah, along with coarse bread, thick pottages, those grain-based stews or gruels, and sometimes fish, rabbit, or small birds if they could catch them.
And more vegetables.
Significantly more vegetables, yes. Peasants ate far more veggies, legumes, root vegetables than the rich, simply because they were available, easy to grow, and formed the backbone of their diet, provided essential calories and nutrients.
What were the pottages like?
Often centered around mush or gruel, made from dried oats, barley, other grains, just mixed with water. Described as having the consistency of, say, modern oatmeal. Filling, cheap, basic calories, but probably not much variety day to day.
Okay, so back to the fancy stuff for a second. How do they actually prepare those unusual ingredients, like the calf's head? You said there were detailed recipes?
Oh, incredibly intricate recipes. It shows real culinary skill. For a calf's head, for example, steps might include plucking out the brains,
Okay.
soaking the head to clean it thoroughly, then making a rich pudding inside the head cavity using eggs, spices, currants, dates.
Stuffing the head.
Essentially, yes. Then roasting the whole thing and serving it with a complex sauce. Maybe cinnamon, sugar, ginger, vinegar, highly flavored.
Wow.
Or another method might involve boiling, broiling, frying, and stewing various parts of the head, the tongue, the cheeks, maybe some bacon thrown in, seasoned lavishly with herbs, wine, spices. These weren't just thrown together, they were highly developed dishes designed to transform challenging ingredients into something impressive.
So a lot of effort went into making offal fancy.
A huge amount. It reflects a very different set of culinary values. And on top of that, at the really grand banquets, they had subtleties, or entremets.
Oh, were those?
These were foods constructed to look like things. Miniature castles, animals, ships, maybe mythological creatures, often covered in gold leaf for maximum bling. They were the true showstoppers between courses.
Food sculptures.
Pretty much. And these elaborate creations were valued primarily for their appearance, their symbolic meaning, their rarity. Often, and this is a key phrase from the sources, at the cost of taste.
So they looked amazing, but didn't necessarily taste great.
That seems to be the implication quite often. The visual spectacle, the artistry, the display of wealth often overshadowed the actual eating experience. It led to dishes that were incredible to look at, but maybe not that delicious. Food is art, food is status, food is theater.
A totally different priority list than just, does it taste good?
Absolutely. It shows this profound cultural difference where palatability, as we think of it, was often secondary to the visual, the novel, the demonstration of extreme wealth and rarity. The food was part of the whole theatrical experience of the banquet. Opulence and surprise were key.
And let's not forget sugar. You mentioned spices were expensive, but sugar was too, right?
Hugely expensive. An import, treated almost like a spice itself. And so primarily used by the rich. And they were extremely fond of sugary desserts.
What kinds of things?
Mountains of candied fruits, intricate marzipan creations shaped like animals or objects, heavily sweetened pastries, jellies. They used sugar in quantities that would make a modern dentist weep.
I bet. And what was the result?
Well, the most striking health consequence of all this sugar indulgence. Their teeth often turn black from decay.
Ah, black teeth.
But here's the twist. Paradoxically, having black teeth actually became a status symbol.
Get out.
Really?
Yes, because it showed you could afford all that sugar. Some people, apparently, even deliberately blacken their teeth to appear wealthy, mimicking the effects of sugar consumption.
That is wild. So a clear sign of poor health, something we'd find genuinely, well, disgusting or at least alarming today, was actively embraced, even faked, as a marker of high social standing. Luxury over health.
It highlights this profound disconnect, doesn't it, between perceived luxury and actual well-being, where the outward appearance of wealth completely trumped personal health. It really makes you rethink what beauty or status meant back then.
It really does. So despite their lavish diets, all that sugar, maybe not enough fresh stuff,
Right.
they weren't necessarily healthy.
No. Despite access to expensive ingredients, the wealthy's reliance on excessive sugar, combined with often a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables in their diet compared to peasants.
Right.
It led to deficiencies. Vitamin C, calcium, fiber. Contributing to, as one source puts it, an assortment of health problems. Scurvy wasn't just for sailors, you know. Gout was famously common.
Huh. And did they realize sugar was bad?
There were hints. By the 16th century, some diet books actually started forbidding cakes and other sweets, calling them gluttonous. Now, whether that was based on precise nutritional science or more on a moral judgment about excess is debatable.
Probably morals.
Probably more moral judgment. But it suggests at least an early, perhaps fuzzy awareness that maybe all that sweetness wasn't entirely beneficial.
Okay, let's dig even deeper now. Because if you thought Renaissance eating was just about social custom or what food they could get their hands on,
There's more to it.
there's a massive piece missing. There are deeply ingrained medical beliefs. You have to imagine every single food item, every cooking method, every dietary choice being dictated by this complex, overarching theory of the human body.
It's absolutely compelling to consider the pervasive, the profound influence of humoral theory.
The four humors.
Right, exactly. Medieval and Renaissance medicine was almost entirely based on this ancient Greek theory of four bodily fluids, or humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm.
blood, yellow bile, black bile, phlegm.
Got it. And each of these was associated with specific qualities. Blood was seen as hot and moist, yellow bile hot and dry, black bile cold and dry, and phlegm cold and moist.
Hot, cold, moist, dry, like elements.
Precisely. And these were believed to influence everything, your temperament, your physical qualities, your overall health. A physician would assess your individual complexion, your unique balance of these humors when deciding what you should eat.
So it wasn't about vitamins or calories.
No, nothing like that. It was about achieving internal harmony through culinary adjustments. Food was medicine, quite literally.
So if you got sick, it wasn't because of germs.
No, they didn't know about germs. Illness was seen as an imbalance of these humors within your body.
Yeah.
Too much heat, too much coldness, too much dryness, etc.
And the main way to fix that imbalance?
Diet. That was the primary tool. Foods were meticulously classified according to their perceived humoral qualities. Is this food hot? Is it cold? Dry? Moist? And how would eating it affect your internal balance? It was a complete system.
Wow. How did that actually play out on the dinner table?
Well, physicians would meticulously recommend or forbid specific foods based on your personal humoral makeup and whatever health condition you had at the time.
So your doctor told you exactly what to eat based on your humor profile?
Essentially, yes. And the humoral quality of the food itself wasn't just inherent. It could be influenced by its elemental affinities, its perceived effect on the body, its flavor, even how it was cooked.
Cooking method mattered too?
Absolutely. For example, fresh herbs might generally be considered cool and moist, while roasted meats would be seen as hot and dry. It was this holistic, though scientifically flawed from our views, system.
Can you give a specific example? How would that apply to, say, beef?
Okay, great example. Beef was often considered inherently cold and dry, especially if it came from an older cow.
Cold and dry beef.
Okay, now, roasting is a cooking method that also confers dryness to food, according to the theory.
Right, roasting dries things out.
So roasting beef, that was explicitly advised against, because it would just exacerbate the beef's natural coldness and dryness. And that could lead to an excess of black bile, the cold and dry humor, which is associated with melancholy.
Eating roast beef could make you depressed.
That was the thinking. So instead, the recommendation was often to boil the beef. Boiling adds moisture. And then serve it with a moistening, warming sauce, like an onion sauce, perhaps.
Counteract the beef's nature.
Exactly, to balance its properties and prevent those melancholic effects. And cooks were genuinely conscious of this. They designed recipes with these humoral properties in mind. It was a true fusion of medicine and cuisine.
So even if it sounds strange to us, it was logical within their system.
Perfectly logical. While it's based on what we now know as outdated science, humoral theory provided this comprehensive framework for understanding diet and health. Those dietary recommendations, even the ones that seem bizarre or, yes, disgusting to us today, were rooted in this system of balancing bodily fluids. They weren't just arbitrary whims.
So our modern judgment is based on our science, not their lack of logic.
Precisely. Our perception of their choices as disgusting is a product of our modern scientific understanding. It doesn't reflect a lack of logic or care on their part. They were trying to be as scientific as they knew how, using the most advanced medical knowledge they had.
And this humoral theory led to some really unusual dietary advice, right? Things we wouldn't expect.
Oh, definitely. Foods we consider perfectly normal, even healthy today, like lettuce, onions, garlic. They were often classified as remedial by physicians like Haley Abbas back then.
Remedial, like medicine.
Kind of. They were believed to actively change the body until the body gains power over them and transforms them into its own nature. It's a totally different way of thinking about how food interacts with us. Less about passive nutrients, more about this active transformation.
And it wasn't just medical, you said. It was tied to class.
Deeply tied to social class. Sometimes subtly, sometimes very overtly. For educated readers of these texts, for instance, certain foods like onions, leeks, garlic were sometimes proscribed. Forbidden.
Why? Aren't they good for you?
It wasn't about health benefits in this case. It was because they were considered appropriate for barbers and journeymen.
So peasant food, working class food.
Exactly. It wasn't about the food's taste or nutritional value. It was about its social association. If you were higher up the ladder, eating those foods could be seen as lowering yourself, as inappropriate for your station.
Wow. So what was disgusting or unsuitable wasn't just taste or health, but literally maintaining social boundaries through food. Your social standing dictated what you were allowed to eat without losing face.
It's pretty wild, isn't it? Imagine being told you can't eat an onion because it's too common, or that too much beef will make you melancholic. It just blurs the lines completely between health, social etiquette, and economic status.
It really does. Was there anything even more extreme in terms of medical theories about food?
Well, for a truly extreme example, one that thankfully didn't really catch on, Marsilio Ficino, a very prominent 15th century author and philosopher.
Yeah.
He notoriously advised, as a last resort for the very elderly who had no recourse, that they might try drinking human blood.
Drinking human blood. Why?
The idea, highly speculative of course, was that it might transfer vitality from the young donor to the elderly recipient.
Good grief. Did anyone actually do that?
Thankfully, historical accounts indicate the idea did not catch on, it appears. But it certainly underscores the sometimes bizarre, highly speculative nature of medical theories floating around then, especially when facing problems like aging they couldn't solve.
That's unsettling. Okay, shifting gears slightly. There's this persistent myth about the era, right? That people never drank water because they thought it was unhealthy. That everyone was just constantly drinking beer or wine.
Yes, everyone was always drunk.
Let's tackle that. Is it true?
It's largely a myth, though an understandable one given how common alcoholic drinks were. People did drink water.
Yeah.
And they were generally aware of trying to distinguish good, clean sources from bad ones.
Okay, so they weren't anti-water.
Not inherently. However, alcoholic beverages, beer, ale, wine, were indeed overwhelmingly preferred by many.
Why? Just because they liked it?
Flavor was part of it, sure. But there were very practical reasons, too. One was extra calories.
Yeah.
Especially for laborers drinking small beer.
Small beer.
Yeah, a weaker brew, maybe less than 1% alcohol. It provided hydration and some calories without causing heavy intoxication. Useful for hard physical work.
Okay. And the other reason?
Safety. Crucially, safety.
Because the water could be bad?
Very bad, potentially. Water quality varied enormously. Rural wells and streams could be clean, sometimes. But in urban areas, with higher population density, really basic sanitation, water systems were often dirty, unfiltered, contaminated by human and animal waste. Doctors explicitly warned against drinking standing or putrefied waters because they could engender many infirmites, cause many illnesses. And historical accounts show it wasn't just a theoretical risk. Drinking bad water could be deadly. King Amaric of Jerusalem reportedly died from drinking contaminated well water. The risks were real.
So choosing beer or wine was often the safer bet.
Often, yes. The fermentation process killed many harmful pathogens.
So why did doctors seem to have these nuanced, sometimes contradictory views on water then?
Yeah, you mentioned St. Hildegard and Andrew Boord.
Right. St. Hildegard of Bingen, back in the 12th century, she advised wine or beer over water after sleeping. She cautioned against water for lung problems. But she also praised plain water as a thirst quencher.
So, mixed messages. And Andrew Boord, in the 16th century, he considered water not wholesome, sole by itself for an Englisher man, not healthy on its own for an Englishman. Why? Because, according to humoral theory, water was inherently cold, slow, and slack of digestion. It could chill the body and hinder digestion.
So it tied back into the humors again.
It often did. They were navigating this complex world of perceived dangers based on their medical theories and very real dangers based on sanitation issues.
So the preference for beer and wine wasn't just about wanting to be tipsy all the time. It wasn't just a cultural quirk.
Not at all. It was often a very practical, quite rational choice for hydration and safety in an era totally lacking modern water purification and sanitation. They were often choosing the safer, sometimes more caloric option available based on the best knowledge and resources they had.
So what seems disgusting to us, the bad water, maybe choosing alcohol instead, was actually a logical decision in their world.
Precisely. It just reinforces that their eating and drinking habits, from the big picture down to the details, were a logical adaptation to their environment and their prevailing scientific realities, even if those realities were based on a different understanding of how the world worked. They operated with remarkable logic within their own paradigm. Hashtag outro.
So wrapping this all up, what does it all mean for us today? As we've seen on this deep dive, the things that our modern sensibilities might perceive as disgusting in Renaissance eating habits. You know, the public hand washing, the communal dining with shared spoons or fingers, eating peacocks, eating offal, even that truly unsettling idea of drinking blood.
Yeah, that was out there.
These weren't just arbitrary practices. They weren't signs of a lack of sophistication or people being somehow uncivilized.
Absolutely not. When you put it all into its proper context, these practices were deeply, intricately rooted in the practical realities of the time. The social needs, the economic constraints, the scientific understanding or lack thereof. They were entirely rational within their historical context. often driven by absolute necessity, sometimes by the desire for status and showing off, and very much guided by that prevailing medical understanding of humoral theory.
The absence of germ theory alone explains so much, doesn't it?
It's huge. It meant that many practices that clearly spread disease were just commonplace.
Yeah.
Not because people didn't care about cleanliness, but because they had a fundamentally different, incomplete understanding of how illness actually worked.
And the limited food preservation tech that forced them into methods like heavy salting, smoking,
Which drastically altered taste and texture.
making those lavish spices almost a necessity, not just a luxury, to make things palatable sometimes, a need we just don't have in the same way with abundant fresh food.
Exactly, and that rigid social hierarchy, it profoundly influenced diet. Access to fresh, high-quality food was such a clear marker of wealth and power. While the vast majority relied on basic, heavily preserved staples just to survive, diet was destiny, in a way.
Even the medical advice, guided by the humors, dictating food choices in ways that seem totally alien now.
And sometimes even forbidding foods based purely on social class rather than nutrition. It just shows how deeply intertwined medicine, manners, and social standing were back then.
So, understanding these historical eating habits, it offers this incredible window into a completely different world, doesn't it?
It really does.
It highlights the sheer diversity of human experience and also the continuous transformation of what we consider acceptable or desirable or even healthy. It's a journey not just into history, but into how our own senses and standards have evolved, how contingent our truths often are.
And that feeling of disgust that a modern person might feel looking back, it isn't really a judgment on Renaissance society inherently lacking refinement.
No.
It's more a powerful illustration of just how far our societal standards, our scientific knowledge, and our technological capabilities have progressed since then. They were doing the best they could with the information and resources they had, and their solutions were remarkably logical within their own framework.
So, what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What societal standards or just common sense practices might we have today? Maybe in how we eat, our hygiene routines, maybe even our medical beliefs, that future generations, armed with even more scientific knowledge, more technological innovation, will look back on us and find utterly baffling, or even, dare we say it, a little disgusting.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it?
Something to chew on as you consider your next meal.
Indeed. There's always more to learn, isn't there? And considering these different perspectives really does enrich our understanding of history and maybe even of ourselves.